The fourth revolution is gaining incredible momentum worldwide, where dialogue is now on artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, and automation. The question that comes to the fore is whether the fourth, and indeed the digital revolution, will further increase inequalities and disparities across and within societies. How do we ensure that technology does not fuel inequalities? How do we ensure that in the quest of achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, no one is left behind?
We're here at the Ministry of Youth Development and Sports, and we have the pleasure of being joined by Honourable Minister Francis Kasela, who is the current Minister of Youth Development and Sports. He is also the current spokesperson for the Malawian ruling party. He's the former Minister of International Relations and Foreign Affairs. And so this is part of the grassroots reporting project on education ICT, particularly in developing countries, and more so on the African context, particularly here in Malawi. So thank you very much, Honourable Minister. We will just start with a few questions. Certainly the developed world has gone very, very far. I mean, already they're talking about artificial intelligence and the like, whereas you go into many grassroots environments in the African continent, and they still have feature basic phones, the ones that do not have access to the internet, for example. Many of them still rely on radios for information as well. How do you propose bridging that digital divide and making sure that the West or the developed countries do not reach a certain level and African countries or developing countries have to now play catch up?
Well, we don't need to invent the wheel. What we need to do is learn from what our colleagues have already done and improve from there. We should start talking of is it possible for us in Africa to be able to produce our own phones? We should start talking about now so that we should be able to take control of the cost of those. Look at most of the basic materials that are used for those phones. They're coming from Africa. And therefore, we have the raw material to be able to produce any ICT equipment that you can think of. So the question probably is, are we able to see the technology that is there, understand how it is developed, and then modify it to suit our own situation in Africa? Our colleagues in the East have done that extremely well. That's why today, even people from Europe, they buy the equipment, ICT equipment from the East. But they were not the champions of the ICT. What they did was they spent their time to see what is already there, look at how they can improve it, and be able to produce something that is of probably superior quality than that was what was already available in Europe. And they killed off the European industry, and they now all flock to the East to buy ICT equipment. Africa can do the same. Africa has the potential. Unfortunately, one of the things that we should try and improve on is to make sure that as governments we put priority to ICT. There are few governments, because of maybe we think the basic infrastructure is not there, and therefore it's not time to focus on that, training of our people. The basic infrastructure will only improve if we get ourselves focused on the same. Very good example is Rwanda, for example. Today you have people in primary school, children going to school-going children are able to go to school with a laptop. It means there was a deliberate effort to get that direction. Kenya similarly, they are moving in that direction. We can do it only if we think that's the way to go.
This documentary seeks to unpack the use of information and communication technologies, ICTs, in the education sector in public schools in Malawi, and to decipher whether pupils are being prepared for the technological revolution currently taking root. We also discuss whether the conversation surrounding the digital revolution is inclusive of varying societies and contexts.
The learners should be taught to have access to the information about the computer at the grassroots level, so that we are living in the modern world. So if you can just say do not bring the computers because they are expensive to maintain, I think that's not fair enough. But let us try to include our learners, to incorporate our learners into the modern world, so that they can start getting the information here at the primary school, so that if they go to secondary school, they may be proceeding, can be the continuing process.
The future of Africa is dependent in the way and manner its young citizens are educated. The future of Malawi is dependent on the means in which young Malawians are taught in schools.
IT will give our learners to have access to computer things, just because IT is almost connected with computers. So the learners will have an access to computers, which will also help them in employment. Because at early stages, these learners, they don't even have careers. Most of them, they don't know what they should do when they finish school. So having IT in this school helps those learners to build up some of the careers. Because we have maybe computer designing.
I can feel that I'm equipped because at first I didn't know how to use computers, because I was exposed to computers in Form 3. At home, at first we didn't have one, so I was exposed to computers here at school. Yes, and right now I know how to do different things on the computer, like typing, mail messaging, different things. My father convinced me that I should choose computer studies because he said that he wants me to work in a bank, And the second thing why I choose computer is that I want to do an ICT program, so it requires computer studies.
Okay.
According to the UN, 57 million children are out of school globally. Of this number, over half of these children, those that are out of school, are in sub-Saharan Africa. The use of ICTs in education has the propensity to improve the education sector and its outcomes by attracting those that are out of school, reaching those learners who are in remote and far-to-reach areas, as well as improve educational content.
ICT, it attracts learners to come to school. Currently the number of dropout children who are dropping out, they are very alarming. But when you bring a computer, it will attract learners. Because they'll find a reason to go to school, because they'll be praying on a computer while they are learning. And even when you're talking about the current numerous challenges of teaching and learning materials, which when you go to schools, you find they are not adequate. But with the issue of ICT, this will be a solution to these issues. When you look at the teacher-pupil ratio, currently it's very high in our country. With the issue of ICT, it will not be a challenge, because that ICT will increase the contact period between a learner and a teacher. And you have fun in learning, because learning will be a beautiful thing to do, to happen to a person. And access to information will be a beautiful thing. Even the issue of technology. Somebody can grow up with building a relationship with a computer. You never know where they'll end. They can be the repairers of the computers, and they'll have a big company at the end of the day. Where did this attraction started from? It's the contact that they have with these technologies that we have.
Sometimes you'd think of certain calculations, for example, in mathematics. We don't have probably good enough materials to display how those things can be done. But we have, as I said, some lessons pre-recorded, and then you get it from the internet. You download, for example, you think of what we call linear programming. So you have people drawing graphs, all those lines, using the computer with different colors. Now, when students see that, they're able to grasp the concepts very fast as you compare it to a teacher in class on the board and is trying to explain. Sometimes it looks more abstract. But when you have the pictures there and they see how they've been constructed, the graphing, it becomes more useful, and then they grasp the concept very fast. And normally, students, they are fond of watching. Now, once they see the picture as it's being displayed there, most of the time the principle they are trying to grasp is going to stick in their mind.
However, African countries, and particularly Malawi, faces impediments to achieving this feat and making use of ICTs for education.
As a ministry, what are the current obstacles that you currently face to providing that quality education, particularly using ICTs?
I think the major obstacle that I would point to would be the financial resources. As I said, ICT is not cheap. We need to really make a big investment in making sure that we are able to provide the subject to our learners in the manner that it ought to be offered. Mm-hmm. So at the moment, looking at the finances that we are currently receiving from Treasury, I wouldn't say we're very comfortable to say that we can offer ICT as a subject in the manner that it ought to be taught. But I'm sure because everyone now is aware of how important we need to introduce this and lobbying some partners, we should be able to, not on a very large scale to start with, but on a smaller scale, start to offer the subject as it ought to be done. We wouldn't want to go full throttle knowing that we don't have enough resources. So we'll still be going in phases up to until the time that we are comfortable that it can be rolled out to all the schools and every learner will get the same information, the same quality of ICT education that we want.
Given that just recently you received a $44.9 million donation from the Global Partnership for Education, what are the strategies that you then put forth to make good use of resources such as this, given the large sum that you received as a ministry?
The funds from the Global Partnership Education, a very big chunk of it will go directly to the school accounts, and that money is meant to deal with the challenges that the schools are facing at that level. So each school has developed its action plan on the things that they would want to address using the funds that they've received from the GPE. And for the first phase of grants that the schools have received, I think we dispersed those around July this year. Most of the schools have opted to construct learning shelters because most of them are in dire need of classrooms. But because the money is not enough to do complete classrooms, we've started with learning shelters. And I think in a space of about 3 months, July to now, we've constructed about 741 shelters. We were targeting 800 schools. We've constructed about 741 shelters. And we've seen like maybe over 45,000 students have been moved from learning under the sun or learning under the trees to be using these shelters that we have. We'll soon be dispersing a second chunk of the money. So schools are at liberty, according to the plans that they have and the challenges that they're facing. They're at liberty to continue doing more shelters, learning shelters, or to complete the current shelters into proper classrooms, or do other things that they would want to improve in their schools. So as I said, the beauty of it is that most of the money is going right at the school level. So the school, we're sure it's going to be put to good use. We have a certain chunk of money that we're going to use for constructing about 500 classrooms. That's the conventional way, where we're using the contractors and stuff. So they'll be running parallel with the learning shelters. There's a bit of money going into management, so that's school leadership trainings, and the leaders are also going to be one of the aspects that they're going to be trained in is financial management, so that we're sure that the resources that are going on the ground are being put to good use. And then the other part will be for data management, where we're trying to introduce the real-time data monitoring, data collection method, where by the time the schools are collecting the information in the schools, they punch it in, we get it right away here in the ministry, so we know what exactly is going on the ground. So the beauty of GPE is that it's a partnership. We have a very robust financial management system and a very robust M&E system that anyone can go at any time to monitor what is going on the ground, and they'll have access to the records that they have. So we are sure that whatever is being put in the project is going to be put to be used in the right way because of those mechanisms that have been built around it.
So would you then say that the teachers on the ground at the grassroots level prioritize things like learning shelters, like you've mentioned, in the classrooms, and training for the teachers, and management training and data training for the teachers, rather than things like ICTs, for example?
Yeah, as you earlier said, that one of them said right now it's way beyond them. With the resources I'm sure that they're getting, they cannot start thinking of ICT now in that context, because they would want to deal with the basic problems, I'll call them the basic problems that they're having before they can start introducing the other things that they have. But also I'm sure with the resources that we've received through the Global Partnership for Education, I'm sure not many schools would make meaningful ICT interventions because the grants are not very big. But maybe it can be just a stepping stone to make them, to ensure that they've dealt with the basic problems that they have. And should we have more donors joining in, then we can be thinking of the other big things that are there.
After speaking with the teachers, head teachers and students at public schools in Malawi, some of the challenges they cited included the high cost of technologies for use in studies, a lack of access to continued electricity supply, given the extensive power cuts in the country, inadequacy of qualified teachers who will make adequate use of the ICTs, cultural shifts in practices. There's also a lack of funding to maintain technologies.
We cannot afford to buy enough gadgets. Two, at the moment it's electricity. Yes, we can have 2 or 3. But they are not in use at the moment because we don't have electricity most of the hours in the day.
High cost of internet use to be globally connected and slow internet among the numerous challenges associated with using ICTs in education in pre-tertiary teaching institutions.
The internet service is slow, besides being a little bit expensive.
And the ministry's mission and mandate, and I quote here, is to evaluate youth programs as well as develop and direct and have empowerment and mass participation in order to have healthy and productive citizens. Given the context of both Malawi and Pan-African as well, there's an issue of high costs for internet usage as well as issues of power. How is it that the ministry and the Malawian government has managed to provide policy and have empowerment initiatives for the benefit of the youth within the ICT sector, given the particular context of Malawi?
Well, true that in most African countries, we are still yet to get to where we want to get to in as far as I said, the infrastructure, the ICT infrastructure is concerned. And therefore, across our continent, ICT services are quite expensive. That's a real fact. But we are working very hard as Malawi to reduce the cost of providing the ICT services. We are now connected to the sea through the marine cable, and there's a project now being implemented by the Chinese where every district and every training center will be connected to the sea cable, and therefore this connectivity, when the project gets completed, we believe that it will positively impact on both accessibility and affordability. To say that, of course, we still have something to try and do in terms of enlightening our youth on what ICT is all about. ICT is not just about going on Facebook and gossiping. ICT is not about going on WhatsApp and chat. There is a lot that you can do on the internet. You can learn new ideas. You can Google and find out how you want to achieve one or two things. Every information is available on the internet, and therefore we need as well to educate our youth to realize that they can spend more time looking for new ideas from the internet. not necessarily just going there to be sharing pictures, not going there probably just to spend most of their time talking of others. That doesn't help them. But to emphasize the fact that as developing countries, we need to really spend as much resources as we can to improve on the infrastructure of the ICT. And the ICT is a sector that evolves on daily basis. Things change on daily basis. The phones that we have today were not there a few years ago, but today you have smartphones. I don't need my computer anymore. Just with my handset, I can do everything else. And therefore, as governments in Africa, we need to make sure that we have the resources available to improve on our infrastructure. We're able to train our technicians so that they are in tune with the entire world. Otherwise, Africa will remain behind. As I said, we're now in the knowledge economy. We're no longer in natural resources economy. That is phasing out. When you have well-knowledgeable population, and in our case where the youth constitute more than 80%, if all of those can have very good knowledge of ICT, for sure, we should be able to sell a lot of knowledge out there.
Questions linger on. Are pre-tertiary schools adequately preparing students for the jobs of the future? Are government policies in the education sector doing enough to address the challenges in this field? Is the private sector doing enough to support schools?
If the policy implementers, because education, we have entrusted people to implement the education policy, which is the ministry. And if the ministry have got a mindset that is transformed, looking at a positive side, looking at another angle of dealing with the solutions to these current challenges, because the advantages of having ICT, they're just numerous. You're looking at learner contact with the teacher. You can just record a lesson. You leave it in a lab. A learner will come at any time. They'll have an interaction as if they were part of a lesson. So if the ministry, which we have entrusted to implement this policy, has got a change of mindset, it's possible. We don't have a number of schools. We don't have a number of secondary schools, a lot of secondary schools. There are few. It's just a few investment that we can pump into the secondary school and build the capacity of the teachers who are managing our learners. And indeed, it's possible. And it can go back to the primary schools, because having a computer lab at a primary school is not that particular, even though I know the number of primary schools in our country, they're just numerous. But if each and every stakeholder has got a role to play, this is doable, and you can achieve that.
Would you blame, or are you blaming, I just want to get that clear, are you blaming the current situation on the government?
No. That's why I said the role of changing the situation is not only on government. I said even the development partners. For example, currently when you go to Chisapo Secondary School, they've got a big computer lab, which learners are using. It's the duty of the development partners. And that's why I said even the private sector have got a role to play. They can do part of their corporate social responsibility, at least bringing a functioning ICT lab at one of the secondary schools, which will cost them nothing compared to the profit that they're generating in that particular area. We've got banks in districts. We've got banks in locations. What are they doing? So I'm saying even the civil society, from our side, we're not the implementers. We're not service providers. We've got a part of advocating. We also have a part to advocate on the value addition of the ICT. We've got member organizations who are implementers. Them also, they can develop proposals. We can develop proposals calling on development partners to finance and provide ICT. That's why I even said VSO is implementing an ICT project, even though it's a pilot and in few schools. But whatever they are contributing is having an impact on a child. So I'm not blaming government. I'm not blaming anybody. But what the blame should go to each and everyone, including me, because we've got a part to play in order to improve the status quo.
Is the international community gearing itself to ensure that SDG 4 of quality education is met in Malawi and in other countries similarly situated to ensure that indeed no one is left behind by 2030?
As a minister responsible for the youth sector, and related to ICT, we are working very closely with our colleagues in the ICT sector, that's the Information Ministry. Make sure that we, apart from what we are already doing very well in skills development, this sector where it has attracted a lot of interest amongst our youth constituency is given all the attention that it requires. And therefore, what we want to see going forward is an improvement in terms of the kind of equipment that is available, and that equipment is accessible to as many youth as possible. We would want to look at this sector not necessarily as having so many challenges in terms of the infrastructure itself, in terms of the power, but a sector that would bring in opportunities. And therefore, if we bring in, say for example, we say all our youth in secondary schools, computing should be a subject, all secondary schools. It means at policy level, we'll be able to be saying, how do we make sure that in all secondary schools we have power?
We hope these questions can probe those in positions of power to do something positive for the education sector in African countries, and more specifically in Malawi. Nelson Mandela once said, "Education is the most powerful weapon which one can use to change the world." It is our hope that countries and administrations in Africa can put in place policies and strategies that would ensure the same.